Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special report of Channel 781 News. Today, we're going over the pedestrianized Moody Street and this year's decision. Uh, so far, it seems like we're not going to be doing it. So, we're going to be talking about that. Joining us for this discussion is our regular Christine Mackin.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
And coming back on our show to talk about this exact same issue as he did like a year ago is Saul.
Hey, nice to see you.
Yeah. So recently, the Waltham Channel ran an article uh, about an email from the mayor to everyone, essentially saying that she has no plans on bringing uh, the pedestrianized Moody Street to the Traffic Commission. Uh, and after some going back and forth, it seems like that's just the decision that's being made. I'll let Saul talk a little bit about that. But I guess to talk a little bit about the history of the project, and Saul's actually better at this, but so maybe I should just give it him. But what my personal involvement in pedestrianized Moody Street is in 2019, there was a thing called Crazy Days, which was all of these Saturdays in October. A portion of Moody Street was shut down for pedestrianized activity. There were a lot of shops and stuff. The person that spearheaded that was Mark Rudnick. I'm sure there were other people involved, just like people associate certain things that I do as just me, but it's actually a bunch of people. I'm sure there were a lot of friends of Mark Rudnick that were very helpful as well. But I ran into Mark in 2019 when this was happening, and I was like, damn, Mark, this is kind of cool. Like, good job on this. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to try and get them to do this every year, and I'm going to try and get them to do this permanently. And I was like, oh, that's even cooler. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's a political will to do that. And then the very next year, 2020, we ended up doing it for a long period of time. And I ran into Mark like during the height of the pandemic, just like on Moody Street the other, like in 2021 or something. And I told him, I was like, damn, Mark, like you were right. Like this is totally possible. You might actually get this done permanently. And he was, humble about it. But it was funny that he called it in like 2019. But all the, we're talking about all the successes. Now we're talking about not doing it at all. So Saul, help us fill in the blanks here, because in 2020 we joined a bunch of other cities. This was not like a novel idea. We were like one of the first in Massachusetts, I think. I remember reading that, but we were not the only ones in the country to do this, and we held out longer than other cities did. But Saul, please enlighten us as to the timeline of all this.
Yeah, so for the Crazy Days, I remember I was there with my young kid at the time. I think it was the farmers market was the main motivation. It may have been September. I'm not sure if it was September or October, doesn't really matter. But yeah, for like every Saturday of that month, the farmers market, instead of being held, it actually may have been at government center at the time, not behind the embassy, but it was on Moody Street, like the 1 or 2 blocks beyond Pine Street. And it was like Saturday, like all morning, afternoon. And it's important to note that the motivation had nothing to do with outdoor dining. It was about pedestrianizing the street, making it a festival marketplace. Nothing to do at all with eating outside, which is obviously what became the impetus a year later when the pandemic struck. So yeah, so we were chatting before. So 2020, it's been 4 years already. I don't remember who spearheaded it on the Waltham side. It may have been the mayor, and kudos to her if it was. But obviously at the time, no one was eating indoors back in the spring of 2020, and eating outside was the only acceptable way to eat. I think when the state regulations came into being that May or June, like during the reopening phases, seems so long ago at this point. But yeah, the motivation was to let restaurants, and restaurants are obviously a big part of the Moody Street economy, especially that 6 or so block stretch of Moody Street, let them survive. Because prior to that, it was just takeout only. I remember walking into, I think Gustavo, and just doing takeout, like having to just walk in, grab your stuff, leave. And like that was the extent of dining until outdoor dining became something acceptable, once we knew a little bit more about how the virus was spreading. And if I recall correctly, that was originally only supposed to go until October, maybe Halloween. And actually, I think the first year was actually extended into November. I think it was extended till like November, the end of November, the first year, that very first year, 4 years ago. And obviously, there was the grumbling amongst some non-restaurant owners that, oh, there's no parking, people can't reach us. But I think at that point, there was just an understanding that, I mean, this is what restaurants need to survive. Like without this, some of these restaurants might be going under. And if half the restaurants in Moody Street go under, that's bad news for everyone on Moody Street, given the current nature of the makeup of businesses on Moody Street. Fast forwarding to 2021, again, I don't remember the exact chronology. I think we were still not as much in the depths of the pandemic, with vaccines having been rolled out somewhat at that point. But there was still a mutual understanding that, yeah, restaurants are still not going to be healthy if people cannot or do not want to eat indoors. So outdoor dining was still seen as that way of keeping restaurants afloat, only a year and change into the pandemic in 2021. And that year also that may have only been to the end of October. I don't recall exactly. But both of those years, it was the entire 7 days a week, from Memorial Day, give or take, until November, so October or November. So the entire street was closed 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 2 cars, except for one block. I think the second to last block before the fire station. That was left open, A, because there were fewer restaurants in that block, and B, to allow drivers to cross Moody Street just to make traffic circulation easier. But otherwise, the street was closed entirely, 2 cars. I remember 2022, that's when, okay, not a pandemic is, we're 2 years into it. There's a herd immunity, vaccines have been out, people are getting just tired of the pandemic out. People were getting more comfortable eating indoors. And I think that's really when the pushback amongst non-restaurant owners really began in earnest. And again, we don't have the recordings of the traffic commission meetings because the Welcome Channel only keeps like 8 months worth of recordings due to storage limitations. That's another topic for another report. But I do recall, I remember posting like in the Waltham Residents Facebook page that I attended the traffic commission meetings where this was discussed, and I was kind of like live streaming. And I remember walking down Moody Street after they had decided finally to, yes, redo this again for 2022, with the usual comments about people loving it. And then we have our comments about, oh, like, where am I going to park? Or like, the pandemic's over, or why are we doing this? Like, you're destroying business, etc. The same themes that are now repeating again last year and again this year, and that I talked about almost a year ago to this day on our special report. So let's go to last year. So I have a little timeline. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so again, so 2020, 2021, we were in the depths of the pandemic. 2022, I recall the traffic commission begrudgingly, not overwhelmingly enthusiastically, but decided to go ahead. The mayor did not oppose it. I don't know if she was staunchly in favor of it, but she didn't express any opposition to going ahead with closing Moody Street 2 cars. Last year, at the February Traffic Commission meeting, this was not on the agenda. And as I understand it, only the mayor or city councilors can request that items be added to the Traffic Commission agendas. But just kind of out of the blue, she was talking about something else at the Traffic Commission meeting. Again, we don't have these recordings anymore online. And she said something to the effect of basically like, my powers under the state COVID regulations are now over. I cannot support closing Moody Street to cars again this year. And Waltham Channel had reported about that over here. And Paz, who I don't know if he had announced his candidacy yet, and may have been, he was obviously contemplating it. I don't know if he had formally announced his candidacy for mayor yet at that point, last February. But he started putting out feelers on social media just about supporting supporting this, redoing what we've done the previous 3 years, that it had worked. Residents overwhelmingly liked it, and let's do this again. And sure enough, on the March 16th Traffic Commission agenda, there is a talk about pedestrianizing Moody Street again. So the mayor went from being basically just saying, I can't support this, not showing any enthusiasm for pushing it forward, to all of a sudden it now being back on the Traffic Commission agenda in March of 2023. Originally, the mayor proposed this sort of hybrid model, which is kind of like what we ended up having last summer, where 4 days a week from Monday to Thursday afternoon, the street would be open as normal. And then from Thursday evening until early Monday morning, the street would be totally closed. So pretty much what we ended up having. At one point, the mayor was proposing making Moody Street just one way during that time when it was open to cars. There was a lot of back and forth in the Traffic Commission about that. Mike Garvin was not keen on that. Pretty much just having one really wide lane open for one-way drivers. Also, it's a very confusing traffic pattern.
Awful idea. It was awful.
Yeah, very much so. So the upshot is that at that March 16th Traffic Commission meeting, the Traffic Commission decided to have a special input, a public input session on March 30th. Meanwhile, a few weeks earlier, on March 2nd, Paz had held his own not officially city sanctioned meeting, and we have channel 781 recorded that. We can put a link, we can put some snippets of that.
I have seen some of the people who live at Cronin's Landing. For somebody who is 87, I don't have a walker, but a lot of people at 87 do. And it's so wonderful to see them being able to go out in the evening, go out to Crescent Street and walk up and down Moody Street and feel like they're still young. I think the city needs to open. As to how long and how many months, whatever, I think it's really a selling point for all of us, not just young, but some of us who are in our later years in life.
So on March 2nd, independent of any Traffic Commission decision, Paz had a public input session. I was there, it's probably a good 30, 40 people. I don't remember offhand. The usual back and forth. I think that had more people in favor as opposed to the official city meeting on March 30th. The March 30th one was long. It was about 2+ hours, I think. And I think it was about 2-to-1 in support versus against. The against measures were, again, the usual thing, like, the pandemic's over, like, why are we doing this? Like, restaurants can just, people are eating inside, fine, I'm losing business, customers can't park. I mean, there is some validity to some of those concerns, but at the same time, and this will lead us into this, what's happening now, as far as we know, no business owners have shown like any financial proof that they are being hurt by this. Like, they can say that sales are down, but no one has ever actually shown any proof. And it's also hard because, like, for the first 2 years, like, if you're a nail salon owner or if you're any of a service industry, well, customers probably aren't coming to you because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Nothing to do with Moody Street being closed to cars. So business owners tend to be conservative. I mean, this is played out like in Mass Ave and Cambridge, all over the place. Whenever like bike lanes are proposed, for example, like limiting parking or rearranging parking, generally business owners, especially small business owners, don't want to rock the boat. They just want to keep what's working. They tend to overestimate how many of their patrons are driving to them. They tend to overestimate how many patrons are not going to suddenly not show up if someone can park literally like a storefront away. So it's not surprising that non-restaurant owners are going to be more on the fence about this than obviously restaurant owners. The thing that is kind of frustrating is that what we had talked about earlier, like this crazy days notion back in 2019. And apparently I've gleaned from looking at some old Facebook posts of like people that have lived in Waltham for decades. This is something that had happened decades ago. Like this was a thing on Moody Street. So it's not a new idea at all. But it went from this notion of like a marketplace of a festive atmosphere on the street to being solely about outdoor dining. And even the city's social media posts have all been about outdoor dining. It's like, come enjoy al fresco dining. It's nothing about like the urban atmosphere. It's nothing about a car-free space. It's been solely a outdoor dining experience, which to a large degree is true because the city has not put in any efforts to do anything other than outdoor dining. I know that last year there were like various musicians at some points while I was walking up and down Moody Street. But when you start with the focus of it being about outdoor dining, you're kind of biasing the discussion right away because yeah, if you sell rugs or if you're a nail salon, well, outdoor dining has nothing to do with you. So when you just lead with it being about outdoor dining, that's just right away biasing the discussion. So the city held their official traffic commission meeting on March 30th. Around the same time, the city put up on social media, I think on Twitter, on Facebook, a survey asking pretty much, are you a Waltham resident and do you support the pedestrianization of Moody Street? I had emailed, once that survey had closed, I emailed the city's social media manager to ask for the results of that, and she promptly sent that to us. And those results are here. We have around, I think it's around 500 or so respondents, and I'm not going to do the Excel math here, but about 80% of them said, yes, I support the pedestrianization of Moody Street. And people went to great lengths to put a lot of comments in. It wasn't just like a checkbox, yes or no, and here's my name and I'm done. The people that supported it, I mean, we can just skim through these comments here, but a common theme was just, I loved having a car-free, traffic-free space to be social, to meet my neighbors, to meet my friends, and to eat. Yes, to eat, like obviously eating is a big part of it, but a recurring theme was not just outdoor dining, but a car-free space, like in the heart of Waltham. And very few cities in the region have done this. The closest is probably Burlington, Vermont. I think Church Street Marketplace. I haven't been there, but I've seen pictures of it. I know Boston has done Open Newberry Street. I think last year they did it every Sunday. But even then, that's a pretty limited thing. Like maybe it's like 12 Sundays from 10 a.m. till 8 p.m. where the street is closed to cars. As far as I know, no other city in Eastern Massachusetts has pretty much like completely pedestrianized such a big street for such a long period of time. And I'm not including like Downtown Crossing, which is like a 3-block section. So this was pretty unique in the greater Boston area. And a lot of the comments speak to that.
That survey, I think, was like the funniest part of this whole saga for me. And we also didn't talk about the master plan committee hearings, which kind of like talk about pedestrianized Moody Street a little bit. During the pandemic, early pandemic, there were 8 or 9 public input sessions that the city council was trying to do in every single ward to put together a master plan. And in those meetings, overwhelmingly, like 80-90% of every single comment was essentially like, we need more bicycle infrastructure and we need a pedestrianized Moody Street. And so that was really heartwarming to see. And then, yeah, this survey, the city, like there's so little data involved in the city's like decision-making processes most of the time. And like this is one of the only instances of like municipal data of like how people felt about pedestrianized Moody Street. And like it was such a slam dunk in favor of the pedestrianized Moody Street. There's just like comment after comment over how beautiful it was and how important it is and how communal it was. And like you'll get to another survey in a second, but if people want to talk about data and they want to talk about like constituent feedback, this is one of the most comprehensive, one of the only comprehensive things that the city put out. And it was so in favor of the city doing something with Moody Street.
And of course, the results were kind of like no one from the city government went out of their way to share the results. I asked for them and got them pretty quickly, but it's not like anyone like went ahead and publicized the results after the survey had closed. Getting back to what actually was decided to happen with Moody Street last spring. So on the April 20th Traffic Commission meeting, so the Traffic Commission generally meets on the third Thursday of every month, other than that special input session they had on March 30th. On the April 20th session, so this was obviously on the agenda after the input session on March 30th. It was a pretty long discussion. Again, we don't have the recording of it, but we do have the minutes of it, and we can link to that. The minutes are all going back probably more than a decade, are on the city website, so that's good. But the final decision was we're going to go with the plan that ended up happening last year. So from early Monday morning until Thursday at 4 p.m., the street is open as usual, but restaurants could apply for permits to block off the parking areas in front of their businesses and adjacent spaces if the adjacent business is not a restaurant. So that's why some places like Tempo had a huge space, because the place next to them had gone out of business a few years earlier. And those spots would not be available for parking from Monday to Thursday. The restaurants could leave up their seating and their tables, etc. But one key thing was they could not use them during the time when drivers could drive on Moody Street. I recall either the fire or a police chief not being in favor of that, not being okay with people dining next to adjacent cars, even though there are 6-inch thick concrete Jersey barriers separating them. And during any other time, people are walking on the sidewalk next to cars that are driving. And it was never clear from the fire chief why this was a concern, because it's done like everywhere else in the world. Like in Boston has done this, Belmont has had this exact setup since the pandemic of diners eating in the parking areas like next to traffic. It's not necessarily a nice ambiance, but apparently there's no safety concern anywhere else. But anyway, long story short, so from Monday to Thursday, streets open normally to traffic. Diners cannot eat outside. They cannot use the tables outside. Come Thursday at 4 p.m., CPW, Public Works would come, put in the Jersey barriers to block off the street on both sides at Pine Street and at Maple Street. This year, or last year, unlike the previous 3 years, the entirety of the street would be closed to traffic. That one section would not be open to cross traffic. That actually ends up causing a lot of problems, because several of the streets, especially on the eastern side, either dead end at Moody Street or would start at Moody Street. And now with Moody Street being closed to cars during those times, you have streets that are now effectively 2 ways instead of 1 way, with also a lane of parking, and those streets are not really wide enough. And I remember, I'm sure all of us had seen at some point, like drivers having to like go onto the sidewalk or having to like squeeze by to barely have enough space for like someone that goes in and then needs to turn around. And Garvin raised those concerns during the Traffic Commission meeting where this was decided last April. At one point, they talked about just getting rid of street parking entirely on those streets during at least the time when the street was closed to traffic from Thursday afternoon to early Monday morning. That ended up not happening. So it was kind of a mess. I remember just walking down and seeing just like drivers doing awkward maneuvers to like turn around and like pass each other. So definitely any concerns that Garvin had raised came to fruition. It was not pleasant for, I'm sure it was not pleasant for residents on those side streets. So Chestnut Street, Cushing Street, Taylor Street, any of the streets that pretty much dead end at Moody Street once the street is closed to cars. But they decided to go ahead with this proposal, this so-called hybrid proposal. One key vote, though, was that, and this is in the minutes that we can link to, that this was not going to be a recurring thing. This was just for 2023. Okay. I think the Phantom Gourmet vote was also done in tandem. Because when did that start? Was that 2022, 2021? That the Phantom Gourmet kind of latched on to this open Moody Street idea and decided to move their festival to Moody Street. It was definitely 2022. It may have been the year before. I don't remember. But what they decided at the April Traffic Commission meeting was that this was going to pretty much go until the weekend of that Phantom Gourmet Festival, which I think was like the last weekend of September. So again, what they decided upon was that Monday to Thursday, essentially, streets operating as normally with a bunch of parking spaces removed because restaurants have set up there, but restaurants can't serve diners there. And then from Thursday night until early Monday morning, the streets close to cars entirely, and we get this festive marketplace, festive street atmosphere that we've all come to like over the last 4 years. One other key difference was apparently the amount of space that fire trucks need, like in the event of a fire, changed between like 2022 and last year. So in the first couple of iterations of this open Moody Street, there only had to be, I think, about 18-foot clear space. If you go to Google Maps and go to aerial view, you can actually see in the satellite view, like the space that the restaurants had taken up, and there was about an 18-foot clear space. So that's a little wider than the width of the parking lanes. Starting last year, for some reason, and I could not get a clear answer on this, because I don't think we have any new fire trucks last year versus previous years, but apparently in the event of a fire where the department needs to extend the stabilizers on fire trucks to in the event of a big building fire, I guess now we need 24 feet clear. So that's why actually last year restaurants had a little less space to work with. They can only take up the width of a parking lane, which is 9 feet, 10 feet, give or take, not extend a little further into the center of the street. The idea being there always had to have been a clear space in the middle to allow emergency access in case a fire truck does need to get down, which is fine. But never got a clear answer as to exactly why that changed. So anyway, so we have last summer. Despite some hesitation at the beginning, I thought it actually went really well. Obviously, I personally would have preferred it be a 24/7 thing, but I was happy with it being 3 nights or half the week. I don't know how Mike Jason and his CPW folks felt having to come in twice a week to erect and disassemble these barriers, the Jersey barriers, the gates. And I remember some hesitation at the traffic commission meeting about, yeah, this is a lot of work for us. But I thought, I don't know how you guys feel. I thought it was fine. I mean, it was a good compromise. But now let's fast forward to this year. Because remember, a key vote was that this was not going to be a recurring thing. I remember myself mentioning at the input session that, like, I would prefer that they decide to make this a permanent thing, because otherwise we're going to be in the exact same situation a year from now. And here we are, a year from now. But one thing they did also vote upon, kind of as a compromise for that, was to look into hiring a planning firm or a consulting firm to study options for Moody Street going forward. So instead of this ad hoc thing every year where we have to go through the same process every year, let's hire a firm that specializes in urbanism, that specializes in city planning, and what options can we put on the table for a potentially permanent pedestrianized Moody Street going forward. And actually, in December of last year, the mayor did write to the council requesting using $68,000 of American Rescue Plan Act funds to hire a firm. And apparently 3 firms had responded to the RFP that the city had put out earlier last year. and that Mayor McCarthy was, or rather, for some reason, this is in the Housing and Community Development Department. Not sure why Robert Waters is the one spearheading this, but he was the one recommending that the lowest bidder, NIST Engineering. I don't know what is happening with that. The city council approved it. I don't know whether this firm has been officially hired. I don't know if they've started their process. I don't know what their timeline is. So all we know, at least in the public record, is that Mayor McCarthy had requested that the council approve this, and the council did approve that in a December commission meeting. But moving ahead now, I know I had sent a bunch of emails to the traffic commission as well as to my counselor and the at-large counselors asking, is anyone going to put this on the traffic commission agenda for this year? Like, what is going to happen to Moody Street this spring and this summer? And the only one I heard back from was my counselor, Counselor Harris, Ward 8 counselor. She happens to volunteer at the PTO where my son goes to school. And I saw her at an event and was just asking her, and she really wasn't committal to like saying that she was gonna request that this go before the commission or that she was not going to request it. She just kept emphasizing like the one-off events, like the car show that has happened the last few years, the Phantom Gourmet Festival, River Fest, which happens in June, the July 4th Independence Day fireworks, but was not committing to say, yes, I'm going to go put this before the commission. At the same time, so on February, so we had this petition that a bunch of business owners sent sometime in the winter. I don't know if there's no date on it. It was sent sometime early winter, I believe. On February 21st, the Waltham Channel posted a letter that Mayor McCarthy had sent to the traffic commission, all of the councilors, and a few other people in city government. And this is that letter that WCAC, the Waltham Channel, had posted a few weeks ago. So I am not requesting to close Moody Street this season, Memorial Day to Labor Day. During those times, restaurants can do what they did last year. And kind of a firm word to the Phantom Gourmet, they're going to have to do it right after Labor Day if you want to do it at all this year. This bullet point 3 is in direct opposition, or bullet points 2 and 3 are direct opposition to what the fire chief was concerned about last year. Like last year, restaurants could not have outdoor dining during the 4 days a week when traffic was allowed. Why would that be allowed this year? There's a Facebook page of Moody Street Businesses, a public page, where Tim Burke of In a Pickle had shared the Waltham Channel post and was asking that same exact thing. Like, last year this was not allowed. Why is this going to be allowed this year? That's a big unknown, and the Waltham Channel did not report on that. They pretty much just forwarded Mayor McCarthy's letter verbatim. A few of us got word that some business owners had put together a petition to send to the traffic commission to oppose closing Moody Street to cars this year. I don't know who spearheaded this petition. We did get it from the Ward 9 councilor, Robert Logan, who did say we could share it. And that petition is, I have too many tabs open, is right here. So this is, I guess, a kind of in Waltham City fashion, a bad scan of what was probably once an electronic document, but legible enough. So let's just quickly go through this. We can share it. We don't have to spend too much time on it. So this was signed by 40 or so small business owners. The first thing to point out is some of these signatories are, for example, the post office annex on Spruce Street. Okay. I don't really think that the Postmaster General or whoever runs that post office really probably cares one way or another whether or not Moody Street is open to cars. Some other businesses like this Chepe's Bakery somewhere up here. um, somewhere in here. It's a bakery that's taking over the former travel agent. They have not opened, they haven't even done their build out yet. So they haven't been in business the last 4 years. There are a couple of businesses that are on the Queen Cleaners and Code Ninjas that aren't even really on Moody Street. Like Cleaners is on the corner of Moody and Pine. Code Ninjas is in the Cronin's Landing building. They're not going to be directly impacted. I mean, unless you consider that someone doesn't want to drive at all to Moody Street because they get confused because the street's closed. So make what you want of it. These are the 40 or so people that signed this petition that was sent to the police chief and traffic engineer Garvin. So these are two of the members of the traffic commission. The rest of the traffic commission, Christine will speak more about this, but the rest of the traffic commission is the fire chief, the wires clerk, so handles signaling, signal lights, traffic lights, the city clerk, and a few others, about 7 or so people that comprise the traffic commission. Let's just look through some of these reasons. So reduction in revenue. Okay, like I had said earlier, maybe that's true, but show us some numbers, okay? Did you lose money in 2020 and 2021 because you were a salon that no one wanted to come in close contact? Like, okay, you're making a statement, but no one has produced any numbers. Landlord rent increases. What does that have to do with the shutting of Moody Street to cars? Like, if anything, that's saying that it's making Moody Street more desirable if landlords are raising rents on buildings on Moody Street. Again, same thing, reduction of business hours. Well, last year from Monday to Thursday, the street was open as normal. So kind of a nebulous claim here. Again, bullet point 4. You could say what you want, but nothing to back it up. And again, same thing with bullet point 5. Like, okay, like maybe some businesses are experiencing pain, but no one has produced, at least publicly, anything concretely tying it to the pedestrianization of Moody Street. Let's just jump down. We'll skip parking issues for a second. So rainy or hot days, restaurant business is slow. Okay, well, you can make the claim of anything. Like, I'm sure if it's like pouring rain out, people aren't going to the cleaners to drop off their dry cleaning either. It's like, or if it's pouring rain out, someone's probably not going to get their nails done as opposed to a nicer day. Like, I don't even know what they're trying to say here. Like, the CPW should be checking the weather every night and like making a decision that night and coming and putting barriers back based on the forecast. I will say, as we probably all remember, last summer was a very rainy summer and all the rain fell on weekends. So there is some validity to that point where, yeah, there was a lot of rain on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays last year. But again, that's not a reason for being opposed to or supporting the pedestrianization of the street. Okay, CPW, like, you can't make this a day-to-day decision. It's like you can't say, oh, it's forecast to be raining tomorrow, we're gonna reopen the street to cars and close it when the rain stops. Infestation of rodents due to outdoor eating. I don't really think rodents or rats are any more or less prevalent because people are eating outdoors. Like, if people are leaving, like, the rat issue is bigger than people eating outdoors. Go to any of the side streets off Moody Street, whether or not like Moody Street's open to cars or whether or not it's open to outdoor dining, like you'll see some of the sources of the rat infestation, just like overflowing garbage bins, restaurant dumpsters in the back that maybe are not sealed correctly. Outdoor dining itself is not leading to a rodent infestation. And again, the last bullet point is just a rehashing of the earlier ones. Like, okay, show us the numbers. So parking. Parking is always the biggest thing, the biggest concern of any small business owners that are opposed to this plan. And again, it's played out in Cambridge, like, which is much more progressive than Waltham in terms of like safe streets and complete streets. But some of these are valid, like accessibility issues. Moody Street does have accessibility issues. And it's not just about parking, okay? It's about the sidewalks being super narrow in places, especially when the sidewalks were redone 8, 9, 10 years ago, and those concrete tree pits were put in. Those basically have the width of the sidewalk whenever those, wherever those tree planters are. So that sidewalk is now maybe 5 feet wide where those tree planters are. That's not wide enough even for like someone in a wheelchair or someone with mobility issues to pass someone else. Like Moody Street has accessibility issues regardless of whether or not anyone can drive in it. The crosswalks are not daylighted, meaning that drivers often park almost right up to the crosswalks, okay? There were no curb bump outs, which basically narrow the crosswalks, force drivers to go more slowly. Like Moody Street, there are a lot of things that can be done to make Moody Street more accessible to all that are independent of whether or not you can drive on the street. And even when you can't drive in it, there are ways to make Moody Street more accessible. Like any of the spots at the end of the side streets could be designated as handicap parking, for instance, which as far as I know is not done. So I agree that it is a concern, but it shouldn't just be taken just as is that, oh, if we close it to cars, that it's not accessible anymore. Like accessibility is more than just being able to drive and drop someone off right in front. Accessibility is an atmosphere that is comfortable and safe for all users, whether they be 80 years old, 90 years old, or 8 years old. I will say, as the parent of a young kid, and with friends that have parents of young kids, like Moody Street is a lot less accessible to young kids when it is open to cars. Like accessibility is not just about wheelchairs or handicapped. Okay, Moody Street's a much less welcoming atmosphere to young children. Okay, when you have to constantly worry about like running ahead or crossing streets. That was one of the beauties of a car-free Moody Street. Which is why this third bullet point, I mean, I frankly find demeaning and insulting. Like young mothers are having a hard time coming to stores or their small children after having to park far away. Like no business on Moody Street is more than about 500 feet from a parking lot off of Moody Street. If you go to any big box store, let's say BJ's or the Target in Watertown, the distance from your typical parking spot to the middle of the store is 500 feet. Okay. Anyway, long story short, this petition was signed by about 40 or so business owners. Again, some of those businesses being the post office. And I had emailed, or a bunch of us had emailed, like I said, I had emailed all of the counselors about their plans. Logan, so Robert Logan has a monthly newsletter. So he's the Ward 9 counselor that we took over after Paz lost the mayoral election. He had been Ward 9 counselor for decades prior, I'd say at least 20 years. And I wrote him back. I responded to his newsletter asking him, and he actually wrote back a pretty long, detailed email where he mentioned that he just doesn't think that there's a support, especially if the mayor not supporting this. So that's pretty much where we are right now. No counselor has committed to bringing this before the commission. We have this letter from the mayor sent not to the public, but sent to the city council and the traffic commission. We have this petition that was sent by about 40 or so business owners. And it sounds like, as Chris had mentioned at the very beginning, that at least until the firm that had been hired comes back with some results, that this year, at least 2024, there's not going to be a pedestrianized Moody Street. There might be some outdoor dining to be determined, but there's not going to be what we had any of the last 4 years.
So yeah, so when we saw that mayor communication about no pedestrianized Moody Street, of course, we as Channel 7 News wanted to talk about it, but I was like cautious. I wanted to be like, well, let's wait until the traffic commission talks about it, or let's wait until the city council talks about it, and then we'll have more information. But it's becoming increasingly clear from the way the Ward 9 city councilor talks about the definity of the mayor being in control of all this, that's it. Like, but no, there's going to be no city meeting for people that don't like follow Waltham channel. They're not going to be able to know this information at all. And it's just going to be, that's just it. And so now we feel very comfortable talking about it. And so thank you, Saul, for coming on and talking about the history of all that. And I mean, just a couple of points are very interesting. Like during the past traffic commission meetings when we were talking about these things, I remember Michael Garvin talking about how he didn't want the Jersey barriers to be up and for traffic to be moving, but it seems like that's exactly what the mayor is proposing now. She wants both traffic to be continually moving, but also the restaurants to be able to use their Jersey barriers if they go through all of the paperwork and all of the permitting and all of the money spent to acquire that space. So it's funny that that's where we're at now. And of course, Robert Logan can talk about the petition of the 40 business owners. And, kudos to them, because that's just community organizing. They were very successful. We, the proponents of pedestrianized Moody Street, we've been quiet. We haven't been mobilizing as much. And the opponents decided to get more mobilized. And so, that's community organizing.
But don't forget about that city's commission survey where we have the results of.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
500
but that's, yeah, no, that's why we got more complacent, because we thought we had that. But this is more recent. That's all I'm saying. But that's what I'm trying to say is that, Robert Logan can point to that. But, we could obviously point to a different service. Like, city councilors love to say like, oh, I'm just like a voice. I'm a liaison to the constituency, which is like city councilors will do whatever they want. They'll listen to the, they have two constituents talking pro and against for every single thing ever. They can talk about consensus, but really it's just, the city councilors will do whatever they want. And, if you agree with them, then it seems like they're listening to you. And if they're not agreeing with you, then it seems like they're not listening to you. But, city councilors do whatever they want. And it's usually what they want or their friends want. And so it's unfortunate that this is where we're coming to, because it really, a pedestrianized Moody Street was a very special part of Waltham.
And again, I had mentioned earlier, like when the emphasis becomes outdoor dining, it's very easy to write a petition saying, I'm a nail salon, I sell rugs, I sell cell phones. It's like outdoor dining has nothing to do with me. Like, so when you steer the conversation to being solely about outdoor dining, which is what it's been from the beginning, then this is the natural end result of that.
You're right. Yeah, that definitely has shifted. Christine, you wanted to talk a little bit about the traffic commission as well?
Yeah, I want to kind of pull back the curtain on who the traffic commission is and what's going on with that. Because as Chris Gamble said a few weeks ago for another meeting of 781 News, that it's a big club and you're not in it. And hopefully, I'm not able to share my screen. I was going to navigate to share a document that's up on the city website that tells us who's on the traffic commission and what their responsibilities are. It's fine. I can just read the text of it. The traffic commissions in the state of Massachusetts are identified by state law, and the state law dictates who is a member of the traffic commission. So in 1986, a year before I was born, the state legislature says there is hereby established in the city of Waltham a traffic commission to consist of the chief of police, who shall be chairman, the wires inspector, the public works director, the chief of the fire department, the city clerk, the planning director. And of those people, how many of them are trained in urban design? How many of them are trained in city planning? How many of them are trained in evaluating traffic flows and whether there are traffic flow issues or safety issues, or whether it is a good policy for the city? I think one of them, and that's the traffic engineer, who is appointed by the members of the commission, and he serves at the pleasure of the commission. That was dictated out in 1976. So the traffic engineer is the only person who has any training in this discipline, and his job is subject to the approval of all of these other folks. The police, their job is traffic enforcement, not traffic design. The fire department, their job is putting out fires and keeping people alive through EMS services. The city clerk, his job is running the clerkship of the city. The planning director probably knows a little bit about what's going on and how to do urban planning. The wires guy is for the signal. The public works is another one where I'll concede he probably knows some things about what's going on in the city and how to do some planning. But none of these people are authorities in urban design or planning or running a business. Why do they get to decide whether or not Moody Street is open? Because the state law says so. And all of these people are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. So they're answerable to our elected officials. And what's clear from the decisions that are being made is that none of these people want to push for pedestrianizing Moody Street for whatever their own motivations are. None of these people want to push back against the mayor, and none of the city councilors do too. It's a big club. You're not in it. And one last thing I want to say is that the city of Waltham also has a complete streets policy that says the city of Waltham seeks a balanced transportation system that serves all residents, businesses, and visitors. But right now we're serving one kind of business, the retail businesses of Waltham. We're not serving the residents and we're not serving the visitors. As far as they're concerned, the pedestrians can die for all they care. The cyclists can die. If you're not in a car, if you're not driving to do retail shopping on Moody Street, they do not give a crap about you. And that's the message that's being sent by not pedestrianizing Moody Street, by refusing to have a conversation with the residents about it in 2024, and by going forward with this plan without any public input sessions whatsoever.
Well, thank you for that, Christine. I think a lot of people that watch this show would concur with a lot of what you just said. And so, like I said, there's going to be really no public meetings about this. So I would say, we'll keep you up to date on it. But I think this is it, unless somebody grows a spine and stands up to the mayor. I think that this is it. This is all of the communication that's going to be happening around this. So thank you, Saul, for coming on and talking about this. You're always very knowledgeable about all this history. So I'm glad we got you on to talk about this. Almost a year ago, you did the exact same thing. And so thank you, Christine, as well, for giving your 2 cents. And hopefully next year we paid $69,000 for a consultant. So thank you, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Take care.
Thank you.